the House, I'll state the question in the form that the amendment be agreed to. The question now is that the amendment be agreed to. Member for Fairfax.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And the address from the member for McMahon illustrates the very reason why the Labor Party cannot govern again in this country. Yet again, it demonstrates their strategy is to publicly beat their hairy chest, but then behind closed doors get trapped in analysis paralysis. There are two measures in this bill. One relates to safe harbour and the other relates to the ipso facto clause. On both measures, the member for McMahon says that the Labor Party agrees, in principle agrees, understands and acknowledges the intent and agrees. But the Labor Party wants to hold this up in the Senate and kick these measures that they have acknowledged are needed in this fast-moving modern economy. They want to kick those measures down that time-honoured road, kick the can down into analysis paralysis. Let's have another analysis of these potential measures, despite the fact they agree with them. The Labor Party cannot take action, but they will beat their chest. And the chest beating that we heard from the member from McMahon today related to phoenixing practices. And yet again, the Labor Party stands up and says, oh, we're wanting action on this, we're wanting action. They're given an opportunity through this bill to take action with respect to safe harbouring, ipso facto, and they say no, we want further analysis. So on phoenixing, despite their chest beating, and I do agree with the member for McMahon about the dishonourable activity taking place by some, and I certainly have seen it in the construction industry. I suspect in the vocational education industry there are examples in recent times. However, the government currently has a phoenixing task force that is putting together recommendations for action. Now, the Labor Party have latched on to this singular issue of director IDs. Now, that, of course, will be considered in due course as the task force looks at its recommendations and the minister does also subsequently. And so here we have a big issue of phoenixing, the Labor Party only having one potential solution, that solution being duly considered. Now, if the Labor Party wants to free ride on the government's proposals that will come in due course on phoenixing, then fair enough. They are more than welcome to free ride. But do not put the government and the people of Australia in the same situation that they put them in today. Push comes to shove, a vote needs to be taken, and they refuse to support. Despite the fact the member for McMahon has said, with respect to the two measures being considered in this bill, the Labor Party agrees. Don't put us in the same position when it comes to phoenixing, that the Labor Party will say we agree in principle, but we're too afraid to actually take action. Instead, we want to kick it down that time-honoured road again. And so, Deputy Speaker, let's now talk about these laws, which we hope to have introduced if the Labor Party can get over its analysis problem, and that is the Treasury Laws Amendment Enterprise Incentive Bill number 2. Now, these measures are, of course, a part of the broader government's range of measures reflected in the National Innovation and Science Agenda that the Prime Minister and the Minister for Industry, Innovation and Science announced in late 2015. Did you hear, Deputy Speaker, I mentioned 2015. We're in 2017. 2 years ago. And still the Labor Party, despite agreeing, say they need more time to think, reflect and analyse. Extraordinary. Now, the government's agenda was developed in recognition of the great challenges and opportunities facing Australia in a world where the pace of change has, over just a handful of years, become technologically turbocharged. The Prime Minister and the Minister both recognised that to keep up with and continue to be competitive with the most innovative economies and societies in the world, we had to recognise the extent of the behavioural transformation that is currently underway, driven by technology, and scale up to it across the board. Promoting innovation and supporting risk-taking are key initiatives to deliver that competitiveness, because both are proven pathways to success. That has been the case for as long as humans has been enterprising, but it is especially true today in our highly competitive economy. To help promote and deepen our culture of innovation, and indeed of risk-taking, the National Innovation and Science Agenda has many measures. They include, for example, tax rebates of up to $200,000 for investors in startups. The failure rate of startups is startling at over 90%. And the biggest stumbling block, at least one of the major stumbling blocks for the vast majority, is not so much the soundness of their idea, the fundamentals of their business plan, but rather a lack of capital. If more investors can be lured away from the more traditional targets, like real estate, the share market, many more startups are much more likely to be successful and to go on to create more jobs. Another key measure to promote innovation is the commitment of $500 million over 4 years towards restoring research funding. The CSIRO will have a $200 million innovation fund. The National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Strategy has a guaranteed $1.5 billion over a decade. There's $250 million to help private entities commercialise medical innovations, $520 million for the cyclotron, and $294 million for the Square Kilometre Array Telescope. These are measures recognising that cutting-edge science is also, as it always has been, the cutting edge of business and the requirement for economic success for those societies that build jobs and high standards of living, because they are out in front. They're the leaders of industries. The National Innovation and Science Agenda also seeks to address some issues that have, over time, developed in our law and practice that act as a brake on innovation, a brake on entrepreneurship, that hold back those that have that have-a-go mentality that's so crucial when you're starting up a business. Some of those measures have, over time in our system, developed into condemnation of failure rather than the condemnation of breaking a law per se. Bankruptcy is a case in point. The historical constraint has been that, if declared bankrupt, you can't start a new business for 3 years. The agenda suggests that 1 year is adequate. The majority of bankrupts don't leave a trail of ruin beyond their own finances. Many retain a determination to succeed, and with more experience, maybe better planning, maybe a better execution of such a plan, many ultimately do succeed. In the same vein of encouraging, not discouraging, entrepreneurship, this bill seeks to set in place 2 measures, one that has become known as the safe harbour provision, and the other deals with ipso facto clauses. The so-called safe harbour provision aims to remedy a problem that can and does emerge when directors of companies feel vulnerable to personal responsibility for debts they incur when their business might be technically insolvent, even as they genuinely attempt to restore stability. What this has meant is that in many instances, directors will call in outside administrators, even when a company is absolutely salvageable, simply because they do not want to take the risk of raising debt for which they could become personally liable. It's a fine line, obviously. The constraint on raising debt when there is knowingly no hope of restoring the fortunes of a company clearly needs to stay, but the unnecessary loss of jobs and economic activity that can flow from an overly cautious director bringing a company to halt prematurely because of an unpreparedness to confront the risk of liability, even if he or she believes the debt could actually help save the business, deserves to go, and that's what this bill will do. With appropriate safeguards, it gives credit for what can be established to be good faith actions by directors, even if that good faith action ultimately fails to save the business. The bill also makes unenforceable, in certain circumstances, ipso facto clauses, which currently allow the termination or variation of contracts during and after certain formal insolvency procedures are set in train, which can compound the impact that the reticence of directors to take good faith steps to save their businesses, and that can be unleashed. A supplier, Deputy Speaker, for example, a supplier to a project that the threatened company is involved in can, when they learn there's a potential problem, pull the pin on contracts. A defensive measure to protect their own business or their own workers. Now that can lead to a sort of a tailspin that makes the threat of insolvency a reality, when in fact the company might well be on the way to trading its way out of trouble. Now, this doesn't preclude, of course, two parties to a contract seeing that contract terminated for other reasons. It doesn't preclude other breaches of contracts allowing for one party to pull the pin. But what it seeks to avoid, Deputy Speaker, is a situation where the struggles of a business are in fact used as an excuse for suppliers and other stakeholders to run for the doors, because in effect it thereby creates an even greater problem for the struggling business, and it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy rather than encouraging businesses to trade their way out of problems when the business is still salvageable. Deputy Speaker, the enterprise incentives in this bill complement other aspects of the government's innovation and science agenda, which is all about redoubling our efforts to build the national economy. As such, they are in line with the demands, the requirements of being successful in the high-speed and challenging operating environment of the 21st century. In this digital age, which has so rapidly transformed the manner and speed by which business is done, there are increasingly the commercially quick and the commercially dead. When the concept is there, when the will is there, when the market is also there, when you can access the capital when it's required, you have to act quickly. Because if that concept is good enough, somebody else will be onto it before you can blink. And it's within this fast-moving environment that it is almost unforgivable that the Labor Party, through its former Speaker, the member for McMahon, has confirmed they understand it, they get it, they see the need for these laws to be introduced, and yet they refuse to have them pass through the lower house and the Senate. They recognise the importance, but again they'll hold it up and kick the can down the road. The bill we have today, Deputy Speaker, is a necessary step in helping to foster a culture that gives our entrepreneurs a better chance through research, through better financial backing and through more appropriate governance to encourage the have-a-go spirit that is key to prospering in this very fast-moving 21st century. I ask that the Labor Party reconsider its position and do what its former Speaker said and knows is the right thing to do, and that is to allow passage of this bill through both the lower house and the Senate. Thank you.
Thank the member for Fairfax for his contribution.